Oh,
Yes.
hi. Hi. I would like to ask Dinesh a question about Occam's razor. You mentioned that the Darwinian concept of Occam's razor is less simpler than the creator and creator argument. But isn't that kind of a circular argument? What if there was a creator, then who created the creator, and who created the creator that created the creator, and so on and so forth?
The question is about if we have a creation and we can posit a creator, who made that guy? And that's a good question. I want to answer it this way. I want to begin with a short analogy, if I may. Think of the universe as a novel. In other words, think of the universe as structured in terms of plot, narrative, characters, and so on. I want to suggest that what religious people are saying is that this novel doesn't explain itself. The novel had an author, a creator. Now, the creator is the creator of the novel at a little bit of a different level of causation than the causation within the novel. So, for example, if you're reading Crime and Punishment, you may say, oh, this guy Raskolnikov, he did this. Well, why did he do that? What accounts for him? That's a sensible question. It would be like asking, what's causing, for example, gravity, or what's causing planets to come together? These are questions of causation within the universe. Now, I want to suggest that Dostoevsky is the creator of the novel at a different level. So the questions that apply to within the causation of the novel don't apply to the external cause of it. You can't say, well, this guy Dostoevsky, what explains him? Where does he come from? He's not internal to the narrative. That's the point I'm trying to get. So if all of nature had a beginning, it has to have a non-natural, and that is all that religious people mean by the word supernatural, cause. Now, that supernatural cause doesn't apply the laws of physics, and why? Because scientists will tell you that the laws of physics are internal to our universe. Just as language requires grammar, and you can't have language, you can't have grammar without language, right? Grammar is the rules for how language internally interacts. The laws of physics are the rules for how our universe interacts. So the laws of physics, I'm just finishing my point, don't apply, you may say, outside of the singularity. If God created the universe, and I'll put an if before it, he didn't use any of the existing laws of physics to do it. That's my point.
To follow up on that,
Dinesh, the trouble with that argument is that you basically contradict yourself. You say, you use the word created, which is in effect a word from the novel, and you claim to give it meaning. Well, if it doesn't mean what it means in the novel, then we don't know what it means. And so your insistence that, well, look, if it has a beginning, something has to create it. That's, you're helping yourself to the regularities within the world, within the natural world, and then you're saying, oh, but they don't apply outside the natural world. Well, if they don't apply outside the natural world, then you have no right to talk about creation at all, because that's something that we know of from the natural world.
Forgive me if I don't articulate this very clearly, but as far as I understand it, Pascal's wager is basically you're betting on if you don't believe in God, then you might be screwing yourself over in the afterlife, because then you'll be divided from him. And the thing I take issue with, or that I find kind of makes the whole argument fallacious, is it doesn't allow for the possibility that a non-believer could, in fact, be intimate with the divine in the afterlife. It assumes the kind of Abrahamic premise that disbelief is in some fashion offensive to the divine, and therefore divides you from him or it in the afterlife. And basically what I'm saying is, if we then say, okay, it is possible that a non-believer could find intimacy with the divine in the afterlife, then Pascal's wager is reduced to, well, it's still a really good bet because a lot of people believe in these kind of Judeo-Christian idea of reward and punishment based on faith. But then where do you draw the line? Because then I could come up with a rule today that said I feel really strongly that if you don't do 10 push-ups a day, you're going to hell. And it's a good bet, because if you go ahead and do the 10 push-ups, then you're all set. But if you don't do them, you're risking going to hell. So I'm just saying, where do you draw the line in terms of absurdity? I mean, is it a more valid risk because so many people believe in this reward-punishment scheme?
Well, I think the power of Pascal's wager is the following, and that is that it, well, two things. One is it exposes the great weakness of the agnostic position. Because the agnostic usually fashions himself or herself a morally superior person who stays in this sort of suspended doubt awaiting evidence. And what Pascal is saying is that, listen, no, this is not a reasonable position, not only, by the way, because of the afterlife, but because the afterlife makes a lot of difference in how you live now. I mean, imagine if someone were to say to you, instead of living for 80 years, you're going to live for 500 years. You probably would live somewhat differently. Or like the recent movie with Queen Latifah, where you know you have only 7 more days to live. You would live differently. We would all live differently if we believed in eternal life. So the point that Pascal is making is you have to take the idea seriously, not just for then, but also for now. It's going to affect how you live now. Okay? So agnosticism becomes a sort of willful refusal to take a stance when it makes a lot of difference what you decide. See, one of the problems with saying I'll only stick with scientific issues and only go with the scientific evidence is that science, while sovereign in its own sphere, doesn't affect large spheres of life, including love, including consciousness, including will. I'm not saying science has nothing to say about it, but just read Steven Pinker's How the Mind Works. Science hasn't gotten very far in explaining sentience, morality. Not that the evolutionists haven't tried. They've tried really hard. And I'll say a word later maybe about evolution and morality. But what Pascal is basically saying is, in much of life, many of the decisions you make, you graduate from Tufts, you have a choice. Do I become a poet or I go to law school? That choice may affect everything that subsequently happens to you. It may affect who you marry, where you go to graduate school, or whether you go at all, whether you end up in politics or a partner in a law firm. And you have no information. You can never get full information, and yet you have to choose. And the same is true of God as well. That's the argument.